The morning Samuel Yoder found the foreclosure notice nailed to his barn door, he did something he hadn't done since his wife Sarah died. He wept, not the silent tears he'd shed at her funeral, surrounded by 200 members of their Amish community, but raw, shoulder-shaking sobs that echoed across the empty fields. His calloused hands trembled as they held the paper that threatened to erase 5 generations of Yoder sweat and soil. In 3 months, everything would be gone. Unless he could perform a miracle at tomorrow's county auction. The rooster's crow pierced through the pre-dawn darkness as Samuel sat at his kitchen table, the kerosene lamp casting dancing shadows across the worn wood. The house felt too quiet, even with his 3 children sleeping upstairs. Mary, his eldest at 14, had taken on her mother's duties with a grace that both filled him with pride and broke his heart. 10-year-old Jacob tried so hard to be the man of the house, his small shoulders carrying burdens no child should bear. And little Emma, just 6, still asked when Mama was coming home from heaven. Samuel's fingers traced the auction flyer he'd picked up at Miller's General Store. Lancaster County Grand Charity Auction, it proclaimed in bold letters, featuring the mysterious golden ticket prize. Winner chooses any single item free. He'd overheard English folks talking about it in town. The auction was organized by Judge Harrison Crawford, the wealthiest and most influential man in the county. Crawford owned half the commercial real estate in Lancaster and had a reputation for looking at the Amish as quaint tourist attractions rather than people. But this auction, this golden ticket, it could be the answer to Samuel's prayers. The medical bills from Sarah's 18-month battle with cancer had drained their savings, depleted their emergency fund, and forced Samuel to take loans against the farm. $47,000. That number haunted him like a ghost. In the Amish world, where community support was everything, many had helped. Benefit auctions had raised thousands. Neighbors had brought meals and help with harvests. But the bills kept coming, and even Amish generosity had limits. Papa. Samuel looked up to see Mary descending the stairs, her prayer cap slightly askew from sleep. Even in the dim lamplight, he could see Sarah in her face, the same gentle eyes, the same determined set to her jaw. "Why are you awake, daughter? I heard you moving about." She moved to the stove, automatically beginning breakfast preparations. "You're thinking about the auction." It wasn't a question. Mary had developed her mother's intuition, that ability to read the unspoken worries that lined her father's face. "The golden ticket could change everything," Samuel said quietly. "If I could win it, choose one of the expensive items, maybe that antique tractor the English collector is selling, or the classic car, I could sell it immediately and pay off enough debt to buy us time." Mary's hands stilled on the eggs she was cracking. "But Papa, you know what the elders say about gambling." "It's not gambling," Samuel said, though the words tasted like ash in his mouth. It's participating in a charity auction. The money goes to the county hospital." "That's different, but was it?" Samuel had wrestled with this question all week. The ordning their unwritten code of conduct was clear about games of chance. Yet this wasn't a casino or a lottery. This was an auction where he'd be buying tickets for charity, and one ticket would randomly win. The distinction felt thin as spring ice, but it was all he had. "Bishop Stoltzfors won't approve," Mary said softly. "Bishop Stoltzfors won't see his family's farm sold to developers who'll turn it into a shopping center," Samuel replied, sharper than he intended. He immediately softened his tone. "Forgive me, I shouldn't speak so." Mary came around the table and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Mama would understand." Those 3 words nearly undid him. Sarah would understand. She'd always been the bridge between his strict adherence to tradition and the practical needs of their family. She'd known when to bend without breaking, when to hold firm without being rigid. "Your mother was supposed to be here," Samuel whispered. "We were supposed to grow old together, watch you children marry, hold our grandchildren. Now I can't even hold on to the land her father's father cleared with his own hands." "God has a plan," Mary said, repeating the words they'd all said so many times they'd become both comfort and challenge. Sometimes I wish he'd share it with me, Samuel admitted. The sound of buggy wheels on gravel drew their attention. Through the window, Samuel saw his brother-in-law, Eli Byler, approach. Eli had married Sarah's sister, Rebecca, and since Sarah's death, he'd been a constant presence, sometimes supportive, sometimes suffocating. Eli entered without knocking, as was his way. He was a bear of a man, with a thick beard that reached his chest and hands that could split wood with frightening efficiency. His eyes, however, held a gentleness that belied his imposing frame. "Brother," he greeted Samuel, then nodded to Mary. "Niece, Uncle Eli," Mary responded, automatically moving to pour him coffee. "You're up early," Samuel observed. "As are you." Eli settled his bulk into a chair that creaked in protest. "I've come to talk sense. If you've come to talk me out of the auction, I've come to go with you." Samuel blinked in surprise. Eli had been one of the most vocal opponents of his plan, warning about the spiritual dangers of participating in English games of chance. "Rebecca made me see," Eli continued, his voice gruff. "Family is family. If you're determined to do this thing, you shouldn't do it alone. Besides," a small smile played at his lips, "someone needs to keep you from bidding on something foolish." The relief that flooded through Samuel was overwhelming. He hadn't realized how much he'd been dreading facing the English crowd alone until this moment. "Denke," he said simply. "Don't thank me yet," Eli warned. "Bishop Stoltzfus has called a meeting for tonight. Word has spread about your intentions. There will be discussion." Samuel's stomach clenched. A community meeting about his actions could result in anything from gentle correction to shunning, depending on how the bishop and elders viewed his participation in the auction. But the foreclosure notice upstairs reminded him he had little choice. "I'll face whatever comes," he said. Mary served breakfast as Jacob and Emma came downstairs, their presence filling the kitchen with the normal chaos of a morning routine. Jacob immediately began pestering Eli about helping with the horses, while Emma climbed into Samuel's lap, her small arms wrapping around his neck. "Papa, will you braid my hair?" she asked, her voice still thick with sleep. "That's Mary's job now, little one," Samuel said gently. "But you used to do Mama's hair sometimes." "I remember." The kitchen fell silent. Even Jacob stopped his chatter. Sarah had indeed loved when Samuel would help with her hair in the mornings, his farmer's fingers surprisingly gentle with the long strand. It had been one of their private moments, a small intimacy in a life full of hard work and responsibility. Perhaps I could try," Samuel said, his voice rough. Emma beamed and turned around in his lap. Her hair was lighter than Sarah's had been, more like spun wheat than honey. But as his fingers began the familiar motions of braiding, he could almost pretend. "You're doing it wrong," Mary said gently, coming over to guide his hands. "Like this, Papa. Mama taught me it." Together, they braided Emma's hair, and for a moment, the weight of their loss felt shared rather than crushing. After breakfast, Samuel and Eli set out to work the fields. The corn was coming in well despite the dry summer, and the soybeans showed promise. It was good land, productive land that had never known pesticides or industrial fertilizers, worked instead with the patience and wisdom of generations. "Your grandfather would turn in his grave to see it sold," Eli said as they walked the rows. "He'd turn faster to see his great-grandchildren homeless." Samuel replied. They worked in companionable silence until noon, when Mary called them in for lunch. The afternoon would bring the community meeting, and after that, tomorrow's auction loomed like a mountain to be climbed. As Samuel washed the soil from his hands at the pump, he noticed a car pulling up the drive. English visitors weren't unusual. Tourists often stopped to buy eggs or vegetables from their roadside stand, but this was no tourist vehicle. It was a black town car, the kind important people rode in. The door opened, and Judge Harrison Crawford himself stepped out. Samuel had seen the judge from a distance at various county functions, but never up close. Crawford was in his 60s, with silver hair that looked expensive, even to Samuel's unworldly eye. His suit probably cost more than Samuel made in a year. But it was his eyes that struck Samuel most, cold and calculating, like he was measuring the resale value of everything he saw. "Mr. Yoder," Crawford said, not offering his hand, "I understand you're planning to attend my auction tomorrow." "It's a public auction," Samuel replied carefully. "Indeed it is." Crawford's gaze swept over the farm, lingering on the peeling paint of the barn, the patched roof of the house. "Shame about your situation. Medical debt is crushing so many these days. We manage. Do you?" Crawford pulled out a check. "I could write you a check right now. $20,000. Cash. No strings attached. All you have to do is agree not to attend the auction tomorrow." Samuel stared at the check. 20,000 would buy him time, perhaps 6 months. But it wouldn't save the farm. Only the golden ticket could do that. "Why?" he asked. Crawford's smile was thin as paper. "Let's say I have a particular interest in ensuring the golden ticket goes to someone who'll appreciate it properly. The Amish don't typically appreciate modern valuable William the way they should be appreciated." "You mean you want to ensure it goes to someone who thinks like you do?" "I mean I want to ensure it goes to someone who understands value." Crawford's eyes hardened. 25,000 final offer. Samuel thought of Sarah, of her final days when she'd made him promise to keep the farm for the children. He thought of his grandfather's hands breaking this very soil for the first time. "No." Crawford's face darkened. "You people always were too proud for your own good. Don't say I didn't try to help." He turned back to his car, then paused. "Oh, and Yoder, that golden ticket isn't what you think it is. Win it, and you might find some prizes come with a cost you can't afford." The car drove away, leaving Samuel standing in a cloud of dust and doubt. "What did he mean?" Eli asked, having watched from the porch. "I don't know," Samuel admitted, "but I suppose we'll find out tomorrow." The sun was beginning its descent when they arrived at the Byler farm for the community meeting. Buggies were already lined up like black beetles against the barn. Inside, 60 members of their district had gathered, their faces ranging from sympathetic to stern. Bishop Stoltzfus stood at the front, his white beard reaching nearly to his waist. At 81, he'd led their community for 30 years through changes that would have broken lesser men. His voice, when he spoke, still commanded absolute attention. "Samuel Yoder," he began, "you have asked to participate in an English game of chance. I have asked to attend a charity auction where one ticket will randomly win a prize." Samuel corrected respectfully. "You split hairs. I split hairs to save my family's heritage." A murmur ran through the gathered community. It was bold to speak so directly to the bishop. "Your wife's death has been a tragedy for us all," Stoltzfus said, his voice softening slightly. "Sarah was a light in our community, but grief cannot excuse abandoning our principles." "What principle is more important than providing for one's family?" Samuel asked. "Does not Timothy tell us that anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith?" "You quote scripture to justify gambling. I quote scripture to justify survival." The room erupted in discussion. Some sided with Samuel, arguing that exceptional circumstances called for exceptional measures. Others warned of the slippery slope, of how one compromise led to another, until their way of life was indistinguishable from the English world. Finally, Stoltzfus raised his hand for silence. "Samuel Yoder, if you proceed with this plan, you walk a dangerous path. I cannot forbid it. The auction is for charity, and you are not gambling in the traditional sense. But neither can I condone it. You will not be shunned, but you will be watched. If this leads you away from our faith, if you begin to value English wealth over Amish principles, there will be consequences." "I understand," Samuel said. "Do you?" Stoltzfus's eyes pierced through him. "The English judge who organizes this, Crawford, he is known to us. He has tried before to buy Amish land for his developments. He sees us as obstacles to progress, quaint relics to be moved aside. Be careful you don't become his tool." The meeting dispersed with the issue unresolved, but Samuel's path grudgingly accepted. As he loaded his children into the buggy for the ride home, Rebecca Byler approached with a covered dish. "For your supper," she said simply. "And Samuel," she looked so much like Sarah in the fading light that his breath caught. "She would be proud of you for fighting. Don't let anyone tell you different." That night, after the children were asleep, Samuel sat again at his kitchen table. Tomorrow would bring the auction, the golden ticket, and perhaps salvation or damnation. He pulled out Sarah's Bible, the one she'd read from every morning until her hands became too weak to hold it. Inside the front cover, she'd written a note he hadn't seen before. "Samuel, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't mourn too long. Fight for our babies. Fight for our land. And remember, God's plan isn't always what we expect, but it's always what we need. All my love, Sarah." Samuel closed the Bible and prepared for what tomorrow would bring, unaware that the golden ticket would indeed change everything, just not in any way he could imagine. The morning of the auction arrived wrapped in an unseasonable fog that clung to the valleys of Lancaster County like a burial shroud. Samuel stood at his bedroom window, watching the sun struggle to penetrate the thick mist. It felt like an omen, though of what he couldn't say. "Papa, you're wearing that?" Mary's voice carried a note of concern as she stood in his doorway. Samuel looked down at his best church clothes, black broadfall trousers, white shirt, black vest, and his good hat. The same outfit he'd worn to Sarah's funeral. "Should I wear something different?" "No, it's just—" Mary paused, choosing her words carefully. "You look like you're going to a funeral, not an auction." "Perhaps I am," Samuel murmured, then forced a smile. "Or perhaps to a resurrection." Downstairs, Eli was already waiting, his massive frame making the kitchen seem smaller. Rebecca had come too, ostensibly to watch the children, but Samuel knew she was there for moral support. Jacob sat at the table, his young face serious as he counted and recounted the money they'd scraped together for the auction tickets. $437, he announced proudly. "I counted 3 times. It was everything they had." Samuel had sold 2 cows, some farming equipment they could barely spare, and Sarah's quilts, the ones she'd made for sale, not the family ones. Each dollar represented a sacrifice, a small death of their former life. "That should buy plenty of tickets," Eli said, though his voice lacked conviction. They had no idea how much tickets would cost or how many would be sold. Emma tugged at Samuel's pants leg. "Papa, are you going to win us a new mama at the auction?" The kitchen fell silent. Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth, and Mary turned away to hide her tears. Samuel knelt down to Emma's level. "No, little one. No one could replace your mama. I'm going to try to win something to help us keep our farm." "Oh," Emma considered this. "Could you win a pony instead?" Despite everything, Samuel found himself chuckling. "I'll see what I can do." The fog had lifted slightly by the time Samuel and Eli set out in the buggy, but the air still felt heavy with moisture and possibility. The auction was being held at the county fairgrounds, 5 miles from the Yoder farm. As they traveled, they passed other Amish buggies heading in the same direction, some to participate, others simply to observe this unusual event, like moths to a flame. Eli muttered. The fairgrounds were already packed when they arrived. Samuel had never seen such a collection of vehicles, everything from rusty pickup trucks to gleaming luxury cars that cost more than his farm. The English world had turned out in force for Judge Crawford's charity auction. They tied up the horse and made their way toward the massive tent that had been erected for the event. Outside, vendors sold food and drinks, their prices inflated for the occasion. Samuel noticed several news vans and groaned inwardly. The last thing he needed was to become a curiosity for the English media. "Samuel Yoder," he turned to see Jonas King approaching. Jonas had left the Amish faith 5 years ago during his Rumspringa and never returned. He now worked as a contractor in Lancaster, successful by English standards, but forever marked as lost by the Amish community. "Jonas," Samuel acknowledged stiffly. "I heard about your situation," Jonas said. ignoring the coldness, the medical bills, the foreclosure. "I'm sorry about Sarah." "Thank you." Jonas pulled out a thick envelope. "Here, $2,000. Buy more tickets. Increase your chances." Samuel stared at the envelope as if it were a serpent. Taking money from Jonas, someone who had abandoned the faith, would be seen as an endorsement of his choices. "I can't. Pride won't save your farm, Samuel. Neither will compromising everything I believe in." Jonas's face hardened. "I compromised everything I believed in, and I'm not the one about to lose 5 generations of family land." He pushed the envelope into Samuel's hands. "Sarah was kind to me when everyone else turned their backs. Consider this repaying her kindness." Before Samuel could respond, Jonas disappeared into the crowd. "You're not keeping that," Eli said. Samuel looked at the envelope, feeling its weight. $2,000 would buy many more tickets, greatly increasing his odds. But at what cost to his soul? "I need to think," he said, tucking the envelope inside his vest. They entered the tent, and Samuel's breath caught. He'd expected something like their community auctions, simple affairs with quilts and furniture, displayed on tables. This was something else entirely. Professional lighting illuminated display cases containing jewelry that sparkled like captured stars. Classic cars were parked on platforms, like sleeping dragons. Antique furniture that belonged in museums was casually arranged throughout the space. And at the center of it all, on a raised platform, under a spotlight, sat a simple golden envelope, the golden ticket. "Gentlemen," Judge Crawford's voice boomed through speakers. He stood on a stage at the front of the tent, microphone in hand, his smile as bright and false as the lights. "Welcome to the event of the century." The crowd applauded. Samuel noticed how Crawford's eyes found him in the crowd, and the judge's smile widened. "As you know," Crawford continued, "all proceeds from today's auction benefit the county hospital's new cancer wing. A worthy cause. I'm sure we all agree." Samuel's jaw clenched. Sarah had died in that hospital, in the old cancer wing with its peeling paint and broken air conditioning. "Now, let me explain how this works. Regular auction items will be sold throughout the day in the traditional manner, but tickets for the golden ticket drawing, that's special. $100 each. Limit 50 per person." A murmur ran through the crowd. Samuel's heart sank. Even with Jonas's money, he could only afford 24 tickets. Others here could buy the maximum 50 without blinking. "And what does the golden ticket win?" Crawford continued, his showmanship building. "The holder can choose any single item from this auction, any item, absolutely free. Whether it's a $1 million necklace or a $50,000 car, it's yours." The crowd erupted in excited chatter. Samuel's mind raced. If he could win and choose the most expensive item, he could sell it and save the farm. It was his only chance. "Tickets go on sale in 30 minutes, Crawford announced. "May fortune favor the bold." As the crowd dispersed to examine the auction items, Samuel found himself drawn to a particular display. It was a collection of medical equipment being sold by the hospital, outdated but functional machines they were replacing with newer models. Among them was an infusion pump, the exact model that had delivered Sarah's chemotherapy. That one was hers. Samuel turned to find Dr. Martinez, Sarah's oncologist, standing beside him. The doctor looked older than Samuel remembered, as if Sarah's death had aged him too. "How can you know?" Samuel asked. "Serial number. I remember because it broke during one of her treatments. She made a joke about it being like her broken but still fighting." Dr. Martinez paused. "She talked about you constantly, about the farm, the children. She made me promise to check on you if you haven't." "No," the doctor admitted. "I'm a coward when it comes to grief. I can fight cancer, but I can't fight the aftermath." He pulled out his wallet. "Here. Another 1,000 for tickets. Why is everyone trying to give me money today?" "Because Sarah gave us all something when she was here. Hope, laughter, faith. We're trying to repay a debt that can't be repaid." Samuel took the money, his resistance crumbling under the weight of practical need. $3,437. 34 tickets. It would have to be enough. The ticket line was already forming, and Samuel joined it, trying to ignore the stares and whispers. He recognized several faces. Tom Mueller, who owned the hardware store and had always been fair to the Amish. Patricia Hendricks, the librarian who had helped Sarah research her illness. But also Gerald Klein, a developer who'd been trying to buy Amish land for years, and Martin Ross, a collector known for exploiting desperate sellers. Well, the Amish farmer. Samuel turned to find a woman in designer clothes examining him like he was one of the auction items. She had the kind of aggressive beauty that came from expensive surgeries and professional maintenance. "I'm Victoria Chase," she said, not offering her hand. "I collect Americana." "You people are so fascinating. Tell me, what does an Amish man want with a golden ticket?" "The same thing everyone wants. A chance." "How refreshingly honest. Most people pretend they're here for charity." She leaned closer, and Samuel could smell perfume that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage. "I'll make you a deal. If you win, I'll buy whatever you choose for double its value. Cash, immediate payment. And if you win," her smile was predatory, "then I'll own something no one else can have. That's all that matters." As they reached the ticket counter, Samuel saw Judge Crawford watching from across the tent. The judge raised his champagne glass in a mocking toast. Samuel purchased his 34 tickets, each one feeling heavier than the last. The tickets were golden, with numbers printed in elaborate script. The 001437 through 001470. He memorized each number, as if knowing them might somehow increase his chances. "That all?" the clerk asked, clearly expecting him to buy more. "That's everything," Samuel replied. As he turned from the counter, he nearly collided with a young woman in plain dress. Not Amish, but conservative. She had kind eyes and worn hands that spoke of hard work. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Samuel Yoder?" "I am. I'm Grace Winters. I was Sarah's roommate during her last week at the hospital." Samuel's chest tightened. "She never mentioned. I asked her not to. I didn't want to intrude on family time. But she talked about you constantly. She said you were the strongest man she knew." "She was wrong." "Was she?" Grace pulled out a small wrapped package. "She asked me to give this to you if you ever seemed lost. She said you'd know when that was." Samuel took the package, his hands trembling slightly. It was small, about the size of a deck of cards, wrapped in the brown paper Sarah always used for special gifts. "Aren't you going to open it?" Grace asked. "Not here. Not now." Grace nodded, understanding. "I bought 5 tickets. If I win, the prize is yours. I can't accept. You can't stop me either." She squeezed his arm gently. "Sarah saved my life in that hospital room. Not medically, spiritually. She taught me about faith when I had none. This is the least I can do." She disappeared into the crowd before Samuel could respond. The regular auction began, and Samuel watched in amazement as items sold for staggering amounts. A necklace went for $80,000. A restored 1965 Mustang sold for $120,000. An original Tiffany lamp brought $45,000. Any of these items could save his farm if he won the golden ticket. "Ladies and gentlemen," Crawford's voice cut through the chatter, "the moment you've been waiting for. The golden ticket drawing." A crystal drum was wheeled onto the stage, filled with golden tickets that caught the light like flame. Samuel counted quickly. There had to be at least 2,000 tickets in there. His 34 seemed pathetically few. "But first," Crawford continued, "let me add some drama to our little game. The winner of the golden ticket won't just choose any item. They'll have to choose in front of everyone right here, right now, and they'll have to explain why they're choosing that particular item. Think of it as accountability." Samuel's stomach dropped. Having to publicly justify his choice would add a layer of humiliation to the proceedings. Crawford was turning this into a spectacle. Furthermore, Crawford added, his eyes finding Samuel again. The winner must take possession of their chosen item immediately. No delays, no arrangements. If you can't handle your prize right now, you forfeit. This was targeted at him. Samuel realized, if he won and chose a car, how would he get it home? He couldn't drive. If he chose jewelry, he'd have to carry hundreds of thousands of dollars in gems through a crowd. Crawford had thought this through. Now then, let's begin. Crawford made a show of spinning the drum, the tickets rustling like autumn leaves. The crowd pressed closer. Samuel found himself holding his breath, Sarah's package pressed against his chest like a talisman, and the winning number. Crawford reached into the drum with theatrical slowness, pulling out a single golden ticket. He looked at it, and his face underwent a transformation: surprise, then anger, then forced composure. Raoul 146.9. For a moment, Samuel didn't understand. Then Eli's massive hand was pounding his back, and people were turning to stare, and the reality crashed over him like a wave. He had won. Well, well. Crawford's voice had lost its jovial tone. Mr. Samuel Yoder, please come to the stage. The walk to the stage felt like a dream. The crowd parted, some clapping, others whispering. Samuel heard fragments. The Amish guy, what's he going to choose? This should be interesting. On stage, Crawford gripped his hand too hard, his smile not reaching his eyes. Congratulations, Mr. Yoder. Now, for the moment of truth, look around this tent. Survey all our wonderful items. You may choose one, just one, absolutely free. What will it be? Samuel looked out over the crowd, then at the items. The jewelry sparkled. The cars gleamed. The antiques promised enormous profit. Any sensible choice would save his farm. But then his eyes fell on something else, something he hadn't noticed before. In a corner, almost hidden behind the medical equipment, was a small display. It wasn't flashy or expensive looking. In fact, he couldn't quite make out what it was from the stage. I need to look closer, he said. By all means, Crawford gestured magnanimously. Take your time. Build the suspense. Samuel walked through the displays, stopping at each one, partly to think and partly because he felt drawn to that corner. The crowd followed his every move, cameras flashing, voices speculating. Finally, he reached the corner display and stopped in shock. It was a collection of personal items donated by the hospital's long-term patients who had passed away. Things with no monetary value but infinite sentimental worth. And there, in a simple wooden frame, was one of Sarah's quilts, the one she'd been working on during her treatments, the one that told their family's story in fabric and thread. The hospital must have donated it after she died, not knowing its significance. Next to it was a journal, and Samuel recognized the handwriting on the visible page. Sarah's. She had kept a journal during her treatments, but it had vanished after her death. Somehow it had ended up here. Mr. Yoder, Crawford's voice was impatient. Your choice. Samuel looked at the quilt and journal, worth perhaps $100 to a collector. Then he looked at the jewelry worth hundreds of thousands, the cars worth fortunes, the antiques that could save everything. He thought of Sarah's note, God's plan isn't always what we expect, but it's always what we need. I need one more moment, Samuel said, his voice steady, despite the turmoil in his chest. He opened Sarah's package with trembling fingers. Inside was a small note and her wedding ring, the simple gold band he'd placed on her finger 20 years ago. The note read, Samuel, if you're reading this, you're at a crossroads. Remember, we are not defined by what we own, but by what we choose. Choose love, choose faith, choose what matters. The farm is just land. Our children need their father's integrity more than they need their grandfather's acres. I love you, trust God. Sarah. Samuel slipped the ring onto his pinky finger, the only one it would fit, and walked back to the stage. Your choice, Mr. Yoder, Crawford demanded. Samuel pointed to the corner. The quilt and journal. Sarah Yoder's quilt and journal. The crowd fell silent, Crawford's face went red. That's barely worth anything. You could have chosen the Tiffany necklace, the Mustang, the Rembrandt sketch. I choose my wife's last work, Samuel said simply. They're priceless to me. You're a fool, Crawford sputtered. You're throwing away a fortune for sentimental garbage. One man's garbage, Samuel said quietly, is another man's treasure. The crowd began to murmur. Then someone started clapping. It was Grace Winters. Then Dr. Martinez joined. Then Tom Mueller. Soon half the crowd was applauding, while Crawford stood frozen, his grand spectacle ruined. But then Crawford's face changed, a cruel smile replacing his anger. Very touching, Mr. Yoder. But you seem to have forgotten something. You still owe $47,000. Your farm will still be foreclosed. You've won nothing but memories. The applause died. Crawford was right. Samuel had chosen with his heart, not his head. The farm was still lost. Actually, a voice called out, he's won quite a bit more than that. Everyone turned toward the voice. Walking through the crowd was an elderly man in an expensive suit, leaning heavily on a mahogany cane. Samuel didn't recognize him, but Judge Crawford clearly did. His face went pale as parchment. Father? Crawford's voice cracked, like a teenager's. Harrison Crawford Sr. was 91 years old, rail-thin but with eyes that still burned with intelligence and something else, determination. He made his way to the stage with slow but purposeful steps, the crowd parting respectfully before him. Harrison, the elder Crawford said to his son, you've forgotten the most important part of today's event. Father, you shouldn't be here. The doctors said. The doctors say a lot of things. I'm dying, not dead. There's a difference. The old man turned to Samuel. Mr. Yoder, I presume? I knew your grandmother, Ruth. Bought eggs from her for 30 years. Finest woman I ever met, after my late wife. Samuel nodded, too stunned to speak. Father, this is neither the time nor silence. Junior. The venom in the old man's voice could have curdled milk. You think I don't know what you've been doing? Think I'm too senile to notice you've been rigging this auction? A gasp ran through the crowd. News cameras swiveled toward the stage. That's absurd. Judge Crawford protested. The drawing was completely random. The drawing, perhaps, but the rules, changing them at the last minute to disadvantage Mr. Yoder. And what about the little detail you forgot to mention, that there's a second prize? The tent fell silent enough to hear a pin drop. What second prize? Someone called out. Crawford Sr. smiled, and it transformed his gaunt face. By the terms of the charity foundation, which I established, by the way, any winning ticket holder who chooses an item valued at less than $500 demonstrates exceptional moral character and triggers the compassion clause. Father, no. The compassion clause states that such a person shall receive a grant from the Crawford Foundation equal to the highest priced item in the auction. The old man's eyes twinkled. That Rembrandt sketch went for how much? $180,000. Judge Crawford looked like he might faint. That clause was never meant to be invoked. It was just legal language to maintain our tax-exempt status. Nevertheless, it exists. And Mr. Yoder has invoked it, whether he knew it or not. Crawford Sr. turned to Samuel. Congratulations, young man. You've won $180,000. The crowd erupted. Samuel gripped the podium to keep from falling. $180,000, more than enough to save the farm, pay off the remaining medical debt, and have money left over for his children's future. This is ridiculous. Judge Crawford was practically screaming. You can't just... I can, and I will. I'm still chairman of the foundation board, despite your attempts to have me declared incompetent. The old man's voice grew stronger. And there's more. Harrison, did you really think I wouldn't find out about your visits to Amish farms? Your threats, your attempts to buy up their land for your shopping center empire? I was developing the county, bringing progress. You were destroying a culture that survived for 300 years. And why? For profit. Crawford Sr. shook his head sadly. I spent my life building wealth, Harrison, and my greatest failure was raising a son who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. He turned back to Samuel. Your wife came to see me once. Did you know that? Samuel shook his head, stunned. 6 months before she died, she knew about Harrison's plans for your area. She asked me to protect not just your farm, but all the Amish farms in the valley. She offered to trade her family's quilt patterns, 3 centuries of designs for my help. I refused the trade. Samuel's heart sank. I refused because help shouldn't require payment. I promised her I'd find a way to stop Harrison. Today, I keep that promise. He pulled out a thick envelope from his coat. These are the deeds to all the land Harrison has quietly purchased around your community. 1,200 acres. I'm transferring them to a trust that will preserve them for Amish farming in perpetuity. Your bishop will serve as one of the trustees. Bishop Stoltzfus, who had been standing in the crowd, stepped forward. This is extraordinary. This is insane. Judge Crawford shouted. You're giving away millions of dollars in real estate to people who don't even appreciate modern life. They appreciate life itself, his father replied. Something you never learned. Crawford Sr. turned to address the crowd. I'm 91 years old. I have perhaps weeks to live. My fortune means nothing where I'm going. But meaning is everything. This young man chose love over money, memory over wealth. That's a lesson worth more than all the gold in this tent. Victoria Chase suddenly stepped forward. If we're being honest here, I might as well add my piece. She pulled out a check. Miss Yoder, I was planning to buy whatever you chose and flip it for profit, but you've shamed me with your choice. This is a check for $50,000, not to buy anything, just because your wife's story, your story, reminds me that there are things more important than acquisition. I can't accept, Samuel began. You can and you will, she said firmly. Consider it an investment in maintaining my soul. Then Tom Mueller stepped forward. Sarah helped my daughter when she was going through chemo at the same time. Sat at her, taught her to quilt, gave her hope. 20,000, Samuel, it's yours. One by one, people began stepping forward. Dr. Martinez, Grace Winters, even Jonas King publicly this time, each with a story about Sarah, about kindness received, about debts of the heart that money could only partially repay. Patricia Hendricks, the librarian, was crying openly as she approached. Sarah spent hours researching her illness in my library, but she spent more time helping other patients research theirs. She turned her own tragedy into someone else's hope. 5,000, Mr. Yoder, it's all I have saved, but it's yours. An elderly English woman Samuel didn't recognize wheeled herself forward. You don't know me, Mr. Yoder, but I know you. I was in the chemotherapy chair next to your wife every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 months. She taught me to pray again, to believe again. $10,000, please don't refuse. The pile of checks and pledges grew. The news cameras captured it all. This spontaneous outpouring of gratitude and grace. Judge Crawford stood frozen, watching his carefully orchestrated spectacle transform into something he couldn't control or understand. Finally, Eli stepped forward. My brother-in-law is too proud to say it, but I'm not. Sarah Yoder was the heart of our community. When she died, we all lost something. Today, we get to give something back. He turned to the crowd. Anyone who helps this family helps all of us. The Amish way is community. Today, you're all part of that community. Bishop Stoltzfus moved to stand beside Samuel. I was wrong to doubt, he said quietly. You didn't abandon our principles, you demonstrated them. Humility, faith, love over material wealth. He raised his voice. The ban on participation is lifted. Let it be known that Samuel Yoder acted with integrity. Samuel stood at the center of it all, overwhelmed. The donations now totaled over $400,000. The farm was saved. The debts were covered. His children's future was secure. But more than that, Sarah's love was being reflected back 100-fold through the lives she'd touched. I need to read her journal," he said suddenly. The crowd fell silent as someone brought the journal to the stage. Samuel opened it randomly and began to read aloud to 127 of treatment. Samuel thinks I don't see his tears, but I do. He tries so hard to be strong. Today I met a woman named Victoria who thinks money can buy happiness. I told her about our Emma's laughter, and she looked confused. How do you explain that wealth isn't in banks, but in the sound of your child's joy? I pray she learns this before it's too late. Victoria Chase was sobbing now, her carefully applied makeup streaming down her face. Samuel turned to another page. Day 23. The English doctor, Martinez, is afraid of death, afraid of his patients dying. I told him death isn't the opposite of life. It's the completion of it. We planted seeds today, he and I, in paper cups in the chemo ward. I won't see them bloom, but he will. Sometimes we plant for harvests we'll never see. That's faith. Dr. Martinez removed his glasses, wiping his eyes. Another page. Day 2098. I'm getting weaker, but my purpose is clearer. Every person in this ward is fighting alone, even in a crowded room. Today I started a quilting circle. 5 women, all fighting cancer, all stitching their stories together. The quilt will outlive us all. That's immortality, not living forever, but creating something that does. Grace Winters held up a photograph on her phone. 5 women, including Sarah, all bald from chemo, all smiling as they worked on a massive quilt together. We finished it, Grace announced. 2 weeks ago, the last of us, Margaret here, added the final stitch. It hangs in the cancer ward now. We called it Sarah's Garden because she made beauty bloom even in that sterile place. Samuel continued reading. Day 3041. Last entry. I probably won't write again. Hands too weak, but I need to document this. Judge Crawford came to threaten Samuel today while he was at work. Didn't know I was listening from the porch. He wants our land for a shopping center, over my dead body, and I mean that literally now. I've written to his father. Old Mr. Crawford is different. He has a soul. He'll help. I have faith. God works through people, even English millionaires. Samuel will rage when he finds out I went behind his back. But sometimes love means fighting battles your beloved doesn't know about. The farm will survive. Our children will thrive. Samuel will remarry. I've already picked her out. Though he doesn't know it. Life will continue, beautiful and painful and perfect. This is my last gift, faith that the story continues even when the storyteller is gone. Samuel closed the journal, tears streaming down his face. She knew. She arranged all of this somehow. Crawford Sr. nodded. She was quite persuasive. Reminded me of my own wife, taken by cancer 40 years ago. Your Sarah made me promise to watch over this community. I'm honoring that promise. This is conspiracy. Judge Crawford finally found his voice. Fraud. I'll sue. You'll do nothing, his father said coldly. Or I'll reveal the other things I know. The bribes to county officials, the environmental violations at your properties, the tax evasion. Oh yes, Harrison, I know it all. Your choice: accept this gracefully, or lose everything. Judge Crawford's face cycled through rage, fear, and finally defeat. Without another word, he stormed off the stage and out of the tent. Good riddance, someone muttered, and nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Samuel stood holding Sarah's journal and quilt, surrounded by more support than he'd ever imagined possible. But something was still bothering him. Mr. Crawford Sr., you said Sarah had picked someone out for me to remarry. What did you mean? The old man smiled mysteriously. That's not my story to tell. But look around, Samuel. The answer is here. Samuel scanned the crowd, confused. His eyes met Grace Winters, and she quickly looked away, blushing. But that wasn't it. Then he saw her. Anna Herzberger, the Amish widow who'd lost her husband the same year Sarah died. She was standing at the back of the crowd with her 2 young children. Sarah had always insisted they invite Anna to family dinners, had always made sure Anna sat next to Samuel at community gatherings. "Sarah, you matchmaker," he whispered, but that was for another day, another chapter of life. Today was about closure and new beginnings. "I want to do something," Samuel announced. "With the extra money after the farm is saved and debts are paid, I want to establish a fund. The Samuel Yoder Memorial Fund, for Amish families facing medical catastrophes, so no one has to choose between their faith and their family's survival." The applause was thunderous. Crawford Sr. pledged to match whatever Samuel put in. Others began pledging too. What had started as one family's crisis was becoming a community's solution. As the crowd began to disperse, Samuel found himself alone on the stage with Sarah's quilt. He unfolded it fully for the first time and gasped. She had stitched their entire story into the fabric. There was their wedding, the children's birth, the farm through the season. But the last panel showed something that hadn't happened yet. Samuel older, surrounded by grandchildren, with a woman beside him who could have been Anna, teaching a young girl to quilt. "You saw it all, didn't you?" he whispered. "You knew how it would end." Emma suddenly appeared at his elbow, having escaped from Rebecca's supervision. "Papa, is that Mama's quilt?" "Yes, little one. It's pretty. Look, there's me." She pointed to a tiny figure stitched in pink thread. "And there's you, all grown up." Samuel pointed to another panel showing an older Emma in a wedding dress. "Will I really look like that? Even more beautiful?" "Papa?" Emma's voice grew serious. "Is Mama watching?" Samuel looked at the quilt, the journal, the crowd of people whose lives had been changed by one dying woman's love. "Yes, Emma. She's still here. In every kind word, every generous act, every stitch of love that holds our community together." "Good," Emma said simply. "Then she saw you win." "We all won today," Samuel replied. As they read to leave, Bishop Stoltzfus approached one last time. "Samuel, I owe you an apology. I thought you were choosing the English world over ours, but you chose something higher. You chose love." "I chose Sarah," Samuel corrected. "I'll always choose Sarah. And that," the bishop said, "is why she chose you." The sun was setting as Samuel loaded his family into the buggy. The quilt was carefully wrapped and protected, the journal safe in his pocket. The checks and pledges were secure in a bank envelope, enough to save not just his farm, but to help dozens of other families in crisis. Mary sat beside him on the driver's bench as they headed home. "Papa, you could have been instantly wealthy. You could have chosen the Rembrandt." "I am wealthy," Samuel replied. "I have my children, my faith, my community, and now, one last gift from your mother. What painting could be worth more than that?" As they crested the hill overlooking their farm, the sunset painted the fields gold. The land that had been in danger that morning was safe tonight. 5 generations of Yoders would become 6, then 7. "Look, Papa," Jacob pointed. "There are buggies at our house. Lots of them." Indeed, the yard was full of their community, setting up tables, preparing food. A celebration was waiting. "News travels fast," Eli said from the back of the buggy. As they pulled up, Anna Herzberger was the first to greet them, a casserole in her hands, and a shy smile on her face. "Welcome home, Samuel. Sarah told me, before she died, she said I should make sure you eat properly. So, I brought food." "She told you more than that, I think," Samuel said gently. Anna blushed. "Perhaps. But that's a conversation for another day. Tonight is for celebration." The community had transformed the Yoder farm into a festival. Lanterns hung from trees, tables groaned under the weight of food. Children ran laughing through the fields. It was like a wedding or a barn raising, a community coming together in joy. Old Mr. Crawford had somehow made his way there too, sitting in a place of honor, looking more at peace than Samuel had seen him at the auction. "Mr. Yoder," he called out, "come, sit with me." Samuel joined him on the bench, watching the celebration unfold. Your wife was remarkable, Crawford said. In our one meeting, she changed my perspective on everything. I'd spent 90 years accumulating wealth, and she showed me in 30 minutes that I'd been impoverished all along. What did she say? She asked me one question: when you die, will your money mourn you? Then she told me about your community, how when someone dies, hundreds mourn genuinely. She said, that's wealth, being rich in people who'll miss you. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Emma chase fireflies, while Mary helped serve food, and Jacob showed other boys the golden ticket he'd been allowed to keep as a souvenir. I have a confession, Crawford Sr. said. The compassion clause. I added it the day after meeting Sarah, and she never knew. I added it hoping someone, someday, would choose love over money. I never dreamed it would happen so soon, or so perfectly. She had a way of arranging things. Samuel, she's still arranging things, Crawford corrected, nodding toward Anna, who was helping Mary with the dishes. Their movements synchronized like they'd been doing this together for years. As the evening deepened, Bishop Stoltzfus called for attention. We gather tonight not just to celebrate Samuel's good fortune, but to remember Sarah Yoder and the lesson she taught us even in death, that love multiplies when divided, that generosity creates abundance, and that faith moves mountains, even when that mountain is debt and despair. To Sarah, someone called out, and the toast was taken up by all, their glasses of cider and lemonade raised to the stars. Samuel stood, feeling he should speak. Sarah once told me that we're all just threads in God's quilt, that our lives only make sense when seen as part of the larger pattern. Today, I saw that pattern clearly. Every person who helped us was a thread Sarah had woven into our lives. The quilt isn't finished, it never is, but today we added some beautiful stitches. He paused, looking at his children, his community, the English friends who'd stayed to celebrate. The golden ticket, he continued, wasn't just about choosing between wealth and memory. It was about choosing between isolation and community, between going it alone and accepting help. Sarah knew I'd need to learn that lesson. She knew I was too proud to ask for help, but not too proud to accept what was freely given in love. 3 months had passed since the auction. The October harvest was in full swing, and the Yoder farm bustled with activity that hadn't been seen since before Sarah's illness. The fields were golden with corn ready for picking, and the air carried that distinctive autumn smell of earth, preparing for winter's sleep. Samuel stood in the barn, examining the new equipment they'd been able to purchase with some of the fund money. Nothing fancy or modern by English standards, but good, solid tools that would last generations. The farm was not just saved, but thrived. Papa, she's here again, Mary announced from the barn door. Samuel didn't need to ask who. Anna Herzberger had been coming by 3 times a week, always with food, always with an excuse. Her children, Thomas and Ruth, had become fixtures at their dinner table. She says she needs help with her barn roof, Mary added with a knowing smile. Her barn roof was fine last week, Samuel muttered. Maybe it got suddenly worse, Mary suggested innocently. You should probably go check. It would be the neighborly thing to do. Samuel looked at his daughter, saw Sarah's matchmaking spirit alive in her eyes. You're as subtle as your mother was. I'll take that as a compliment. Oh, and Papa, Emma's been calling her Aunt Anna. You might want to address that, or maybe not address it. Samuel thought. The title felt right somehow. He found Anna in the yard, her buggy loaded with what appeared to be enough food for a barn raising. She wore her best visiting dress, the dark blue one, that brought out her eyes. Anna, Samuel, I brought lunch. The children must be hungry. You brought lunch yesterday. That was dinner. They stood there, 2 people dancing around a truth everyone else could see. Samuel remembered Sarah's words in her journal about picking out his next wife. Trust Sarah to manage his love life from beyond. Anna, would you like to see Sarah's quilt? The one from the auction. Her face lit up. I would love that. They walked to the house together, a respectful distance between them, but something electric in the air nonetheless. Inside, Samuel carefully unwrapped the quilt from its protective covering. Anna gasped. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Look, There's the whole story of your family. Look at the last panel, Samuel said quietly. Anna studied it. The scene of an older Samuel with a new wife, surrounded by grandchildren. The woman in the stitching had Anna's distinctive tall frame and the way she tilted her head when concentrating. Sarah showed me this design, Anna whispered. Before she died, she said she was stitching the future. I thought she was delirious from the medication. She was stitching hope, Samuel corrected. But Anna, I need you to know you don't owe me anything because of Sarah's wishes. If you're coming here out of obligation, Samuel Yoder, you brilliant fool, Anna interrupted, showing more spirit than he'd seen from her since her husband died. I'm coming here because Emma makes me laugh, because Mary needs a woman's guidance, because Jacob reminds me of my Thomas at that age, and because you make me want to live again, not just survive. Before Samuel could respond, chaos erupted outside. Jacob came running in, face flushed with excitement. Papa, come quick. It's Mr. Crawford, the old one. His car broke down on the road. He's asking for you. Samuel and Anna rushed outside to find Crawford Sr.'s town car stopped at their gate, steam rising from the hood. The old man was sitting on their porch bench, looking frailer than he had 3 months ago, but still sharp-eyed. Mr. Crawford, are you all right? Samuel asked. Fine, fine. Car's not, though. Modern nonsense, breaking down when you need it most. He looked between Samuel and Anna with amusement. Am I interrupting something? No, they said in unison too quickly. Flurry? Well, I didn't come about the car. That's just God's way of making sure I couldn't chicken out. He pulled out an envelope. Samuel, I'm dying. Doctors say 2 weeks, maybe 3. I need to make something right before I go. Mr. Crawford, please, let me finish. My son Harrison Jr., he's been fighting the Foundation's decision, trying to overturn the land trust, invalidate the compassion clause. He's going to fail, but he'll make trouble. This envelope contains something that will stop him permanently. Samuel took the envelope but didn't open it. It's a confession, Crawford Sr. continued. Signed, notarized, about his illegal dealings. If he causes any trouble for you or your community after I'm gone, give this to the district attorney. It's my insurance policy for your future. I can't be responsible for sending your son to prison. You won't be. I will. A father's last attempt at teaching his son consequence. The old man struggled to his feet. But that's not the real reason I came. I wanted to see Sarah's quilt. May I? They brought him inside, where the quilt lay spread on the table. Crawford Sr. studied it with the intensity of an art appraiser, but his eyes were seeing more than cloth and thread. Extraordinary, he murmured. She stitched her whole world into this. Look, there's the hospital. There's my meeting with her. He pointed to a tiny corner where Sarah had depicted an elderly man and a woman shaking hands. She saw beauty everywhere, didn't she? Even in a dying old sinner like me. You're not, Samuel began. I am, and we both know it. But your wife, she made me want to be better in my final act. That's a gift. He touched the quilt gently. Would you consider making me a small piece? Something with her design style. I'd like to be buried with it. Sarah taught me her stitching patterns, Anna said suddenly. I could make you something. Crawford smiled. That would be fitting, the future creating a bridge from the past. As they helped Crawford back to his car, which his driver had managed to repair, he turned to Samuel one last time. Your wife saved more than your farm, you know. She saved my soul. I spent 90 years building an empire of money. She showed me in one conversation that I should have been building an empire of love. He looked at his driver. Take me to the cemetery, Charles. I want to visit my wife's grave. Tell her I finally understand what she tried to teach me. As the car drove away, Samuel felt Anna's hand slip into his. Life is short, she said simply. Sarah knew that better than anyone. Is that your way of proposing? Samuel asked, surprised by his own boldness. It's my way of saying I'm tired of bringing casseroles as an excuse to see you. They stood there, two widowed souls finding new love, in the shadow of loss, when another interruption arrived, this time in the form of multiple buggies racing down the road. Something's wrong, Samuel said. The buggies pulled up, and men began jumping out, led by Eli. "Fire!" Eli shouted. The English's development, the one Judge Crawford was building on the land next to the Amish farms. "It's burning." "Anyone hurt?" Samuel asked immediately. "No, it was empty." "But Samuel, if it spreads to the wheat fields belong to the Amish farms. Dry from the autumn harvest season, they would burn like tinder." "We need everyone," Samuel said. "Anna, can you gather the women to prepare food and medical supplies? Mary, ring the dinner bell continuously. That'll signal emergency to all farms within hearing." They rushed to the fire scene, where indeed the half-built shopping complex that Judge Crawford had started before his father intervened was ablaze. The fire had already consumed 2 structures and was moving toward the fields. What they found there stunned them. Judge Crawford himself was there with a small crew, desperately trying to create a firebreak between the buildings and the fields. His expensive suit was ruined, his face blackened with soot, his hands bleeding from moving debris. "Don't just stand there," he shouted at the arriving Amish men. "Help me save these fields." It was surreal, the man who'd tried to destroy their community now fighting to save it. But there was no time for questions. Samuel and the men joined the effort, working alongside Crawford and his crew. For 3 hours they fought the fire. English and Amish, side by side. Crawford worked harder than anyone, pushing himself beyond what seemed safe for a man his age. When the professional fire department finally arrived, the fields were saved, though the development was a total loss. Crawford collapsed from exhaustion, and Samuel caught him before he hit the ground. "Why?" Samuel asked, as they gave him water. "Why save fields you wanted to see turned into parking lots?" Crawford's eyes were different, the cold calculation replaced by something raw and human. "My father," he gasped. "He's dying. Told me today. 2 weeks left. All my life I tried to prove I was better than him, stronger, richer. But he's dying with hundreds who love him, and I'm living with hundreds who fear me." He struggled to sit up, looking at the Amish men who'd fought beside him. "I started the fire," he confessed. "Not intentionally. I came burn the papers, the plans for development, the contracts." Symbolic gesture. "Stupid." Wind caught an ember, and he gestured at the destruction. "I couldn't let it spread to your farm. My father would have died knowing I destroyed what he protected." "You risked your life for our fields," Bishop Stoltzfus said, having arrived with the later crews. "I risked my life for my soul," Crawford corrected. "Your wife, Mr. Yoder, she told my father something about threads in a quilt. I think I finally understand. I've been cutting threads my whole life when I should have been weaving them together." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who'd tried to destroy their community with money had nearly destroyed himself trying to save it. "You need medical attention," Samuel said. "I need more than that," Crawford replied. "I need forgiveness. From all of you. I've spent years seeing you as obstacles to progress. But you're not obstacles, you're the foundation. You're what community actually means." "Forgiveness isn't earned," Bishop Stoltzfus said. "It's given. You have ours." Crawford broke down then, the mighty judge weeping like a child. The Amish men stood around him, not judging, just present, a circle of grace around a broken man. As the sun set over the charred remains of the development and the saved fields, Samuel realized this too was part of Sarah's quilt, the pattern she'd seen where redemption could come from the most unexpected places. That evening the community gathered again at the Yoder farm, this time not for celebration but for Thanksgiving. The fields were saved, no one was hurt, and somehow an enemy had become, if not a friend, at least no longer an enemy. Crawford Sr. arrived, having heard about the fire. The reunion between father and son was painfully beautiful, 2 proud men finally breaking through decades of misunderstanding. "You saved their fields," the father said. "I saved myself," the son replied. Same thing, in the end. As the evening meal was served, Samuel stood to speak. "Today we saw something remarkable. We saw transformation. Judge Crawford Harrison risked everything to save our farms. But more than that, We saw community expand to include someone we'd considered an outsider. Sarah always said the quilt of life has room for every thread, even the ones that seem to clash with the pattern. He looked at the assembled group, Amish and English, farmer and judge, all united by the day's events. There's something else, Samuel continued, taking Anna's hand publicly for the first time. Sarah saw the future in her stitching. She saw that life continues, that love returns, that families blend and grow. Anna and we've decided to honor that vision. The announcement was met with joy, though no surprise. Everyone had been waiting for this moment. Emma ran to Anna, wrapping her arms around her legs. "Does this mean you'll be my mama now?" "It means I'll love you like my own," Anna replied, tears streaming down her face. "That's the same thing," Emma declared with 6-year-old certainty. Young Jacob stood up, looking serious. "If Papa marries Anna, that means Thomas and Ruth become our brother and sister." "Yes," Samuel confirmed. "Good. Thomas promised to teach me his wood-carving techniques." Mary, always the most complex in her emotions, approached Anna slowly. "You won't try to replace her," she said. "It wasn't a question. No one could replace your mother," Anna said firmly. "I'm not here to erase the past, but to help build the future. Your mother picked me. Remember? She knew I'd honor her memory while creating new ones." Mary nodded and embraced Anna, the last barrier falling. Later that evening, as the gathering wound down, Samuel found himself sitting with both Crawfords on the porch. The father was teaching the son to whittle, of all things, something he'd learned from his own father, but had abandoned in pursuit of wealth. "Your wife," Crawford Sr. said to Samuel, "she started something, like dropping a pebble in still water. The ripples keep spreading. She always said one person could change the world if they just loved hard enough." Samuel replied, "She was right," Harrison Jr. said quietly. "I've been so focused on building things that last, concrete and steel, I forgot that what really lasts is impact on other lives." "It's not too late," his father said. "I'm proof of that. 91 years old and just learning what matters. You're 60-something. You have decades to get it right. Will you teach me?" the son asked the father. "Every day I have left," the old man promised. As the evening ended and guests began departing, Grace Winters approached Samuel with a box. "I've been waiting for the right time to give you this," she said. "Sarah gave it to me the day before she died. She said I'd know when." Inside the box was another quilt, smaller, clearly meant for a baby. "She knew?" Samuel asked, stunned. Grace smiled. "She suspected, said that when you and Anna married, there might be more children. She wanted to make sure they knew they were loved by both mothers, the one who came before and the one who came after." The baby quilt was exquisite. It showed two women's hands stitching together, creating something beautiful between them. The past and future united in thread and love. Anna gasped when she saw it. "She thought of everything." "Not everything," Samuel corrected. "She couldn't have foreseen Judge Crawford saving our fields or his father's final transformation. But she understood the principle that love breeds love, that kindness multiplies, that community transcends difference." As the last buggy departed and the children were put to bed, Samuel and Anna stood together looking at the stars. Tomorrow would bring challenges, planning a wedding that honored both their late spouses, blending two families, continuing to build the memorial fund Sarah had inspired. But tonight, there was peace. "Do you think she's watching?" Anna asked. "I think she's stitching," Samuel replied. "Somewhere, somehow, she's still adding to the quilt, still weaving lives together." A shooting star crossed the sky and they took it as confirmation. Inside the house, Sarah's journal lay open to a page Samuel hadn't read before. Mary had found it earlier while showing Anna Sarah's things. The entry was dated just days before she died. "To whoever reads this, Samuel, or Anna, or perhaps my children years from now, know that death is not an ending, but a transformation. The threads of our lives don't snap when we die. They weave into other patterns, other stories. I'm not afraid because I know my thread will continue in every life I've touched, every kindness I've sparked, every love I've fostered. The quilt goes on, always growing, always beautiful, even when we can't see the whole pattern. Trust the quilter. He knows what he's doing. The snow fell softly on Lancaster County, transforming the farmland into a pristine white quilt that stretched to the horizon. Samuel stood at the window of the new addition to the farmhouse built with the help of the entire community 3 summers ago when Anna gave birth to twins, Abraham and Sarah Jr. The house was full of life and chaos. 7 children now called this place home. Mary, now 19 and engaged to the eldest Stoltzfus boy. Jacob, 15 and already showing signs of being a master craftsman. Emma, 11 and the spitting image of her mother. Thomas, 13. Anna's son who'd become the brother Jacob always wanted. Ruth, 11. Anna's daughter, who'd become Emma's inseparable companion. And the twins, now 3, who carried both their mother's names and spirits. Papa, they're here, Emma called from downstairs. Samuel descended to find the house already filling with people. Today was special, the 5th anniversary of the auction that changed everything, and the dedication of the Samuel Yoder Memorial Center, built with funds that had grown beyond anyone's imagination. Judge Harrison Crawford Jr. was among the first to arrive, though he looked nothing like the cold man from 5 years ago. His hair had gone completely gray, and his expensive suits had been replaced with simple, practical clothes. He'd sold most of his properties, keeping only what he needed to live modestly, and donated the rest to various charities. Samuel, he greeted warmly, embracing him like a brother. The center looks wonderful. You should know you supervise the construction. Best work I've ever done, Crawford said. Building something that heals instead of something that profits. The memorial center stood where Crawford's failed shopping complex had burned. It was a simple, beautiful building that served as a medical support facility for Amish families facing health crises, providing temporary housing, translation services, and financial counseling. But more than that, it was a place where Sarah's quilting circle continued, where patients taught each other crafts and prayers, where hope was stitched into every day. Grace Winters emerged from the kitchen, where she'd been helping Anna with the meal preparation. She'd moved to Lancaster permanently 3 years ago to run the center, saying she'd finally found her calling. The news crews are here, she announced. They want to do a story on the 5-year anniversary. Samuel's son. The story of the auction had become something of a legend, retold in various forms, most missing the real point. Let them wait, Anna said, entering with a massive pot of soup. Family eats first. She moved with the easy confidence of someone who'd found their place completely. The house that had once echoed with Sarah's absence now rang with Anna's presence, different but equally loving. Mary came over to help her stepmother, a title they'd abandoned years ago in favor of simply Mom Anna and Mom Sarah when speaking of either woman. The quilt is ready for the ceremony, Mary said. We finished the last panel this morning. For 5 years, the community had been adding to a massive quilt that told the story of the auction and its aftermath. Each family touched by the memorial fund had added a square. It now contained over 300 panels and was the size of a barn wall. Bishop Stoltzfus arrived, moving slowly at 86, but still commanding respect. Behind him came a surprise, Crawford Sr., in a wheelchair but very much alive. The doctors gave me 2 weeks 5 years ago, he said to the gasps of amazement. Turns out they were wrong. Or maybe having something to live for makes a difference. He'd spent these 5 years transforming his foundation, turning it into one of the largest supporters of rural medical care in Pennsylvania. He'd also spent them reconciling with his son, teaching him the values he'd ignored for too long. Where's my newest granddaughter? Crawford Sr. asked. Emma brought over baby Sarah Jr., who reached immediately for the old man's beard. The sight of the 96-year-old millionaire making faces at an Amish toddler while she pulled his whiskers would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. "She has Sarah's eyes," he said softly. "That same knowing look." Dr. Martinez arrived next, having driven from Philadelphia, where he now ran a cancer center that incorporated the holistic approaches he'd learned from Sarah and her quilting circle. He carried a thick manuscript. "Samuel, it's finished," he said, handing over the bound pages. Sarah's story, how one woman's death taught a community to live. Every word verified, every story confirmed. All the proceeds will go to the memorial fund. Samuel hefted the manuscript, feeling its weight, not just physical, but emotional. Sarah's story, preserved forever. "There's a chapter about you," Martinez told Crawford Jr., "about redemption and the power of second chances." "Hope you made me sound better than I was," Crawford replied. "I told the truth. That's better than fiction." As the house filled with more people, Amish and English alike, Samuel noticed someone standing alone by the door, hesitant to enter. It was Jonas King, the ex-Amish man who'd given Samuel money for tickets years ago. "Jonas," Samuel called out. "Come in. I wasn't sure I'd be welcome." "Everyone is welcome here," Bishop Stoltzfus said, surprising everyone. "This house has become a bridge between worlds. We don't all have to walk the same path to share a meal." It was a radical statement from the conservative bishop, showing how much the community had evolved while maintaining its core values. As they gathered for the meal, Samuel stood to speak, as had become tradition. "5 years ago, I thought I was fighting to save a farm, but Sarah, my first Sarah, saw something bigger. She saw that our struggles could become our strength, that our isolation could become connection, that our grief could become grace." He looked at Anna, who nodded encouragingly. "Today we dedicate a building, but we're really dedicating ourselves to continuing what Sarah started. The work of weaving lives together, of finding God in unexpected places, of choosing love over fear, faith over certainty, community over independence." "Tell them about the letter," Anna urged. Samuel pulled out an envelope, worn from handling. "This arrived yesterday, forwarded through the hospital. It's from a woman in Oregon whose daughter was diagnosed with the same cancer Sarah had. She'd heard Sarah's story, read her journal entries which we published in the Fund newsletter. She writes, 'Your wife saved my daughter's life. Not medically, the doctors did that, but spiritually. My daughter was ready to give up until she read Sarah's words about planting seeds for harvests we'll never see. She decided to plant her own seeds. She's now in remission and teaching art to other cancer patients. The ripples of your wife's life have reached the Pacific Ocean.'" There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Young Jacob stood up suddenly. "I have something to say." The room quieted. Jacob, usually so reserved, cleared his throat nervously. "I was only 10 when Mama died. I was angry at God for taking her. But now I understand something. She wasn't taken. She was transformed. Every person here carries a piece of her. Every choice we make, because of what she taught us, extends her life. She's not gone, she's everywhere," Emma added, "and now we have 2 mamas who love us." That's not a subtraction, it's an addition. Even the twins, too young to fully understand, seemed to sense the moment's importance. Abraham toddled over to the wall, where Sarah's original auction quilt hung in a place of honor, pointing at the figures stitched there. "Story," he demanded, as he did every day. "That's right," Anna said, lifting him up. "It tells our story, all of our stories woven together." After the meal, they processed to the memorial center for the dedication. The crowd had grown to hundreds. Amish families who'd been helped by the fund, English neighbors who'd contributed, medical professionals who volunteered their time, and reporters documenting this unusual alliance. The massive community quilt was unveiled, and the crowd gasped. It was more than just a quilt. It was a textile history of transformation. Each square told a story: families saved from foreclosure, children who received medical care, enemies who became friends, communities that bridged their differences. At the center was Sarah's original design, now surrounded by hundreds of other stories, all collected by the golden thread that ran through every panel, the same golden thread, someone noted as the golden ticket that had started it all. Victoria Chase stepped forward. She'd become one of the fund's major donors, but more importantly, she'd become a regular volunteer at the quilting circles. "I need to share something," she said. "5 years ago, I came to that auction to buy things. I thought ownership was power. Sarah Yoder's story taught me that the only thing we truly own is our impact on others. I've given away most of my fortune, and I've never been richer." One by one, people began sharing their stories. A young Amish father whose daughter's leukemia treatment had been covered by the fund, an English nurse who'd learned Pennsylvania Dutch to better serve Amish patients, an entire Mennonite community that had joined the fund's mission. Finally, Crawford Sr. was wheeled forward. Despite his age, his voice was clear and strong. "I'm 96 years old. I should have been dead 5 years ago. But Sarah Yoder, a woman I met only once, gave me a reason to live. She asked me to protect this community. I've tried to honor that request." He pulled out a document. "This is my will, executed this morning. Upon my death, which shall, let's face it, can't be too far off now, my entire estate goes to the Sarah Yoder Memorial Fund, with one condition. It must always serve as a bridge between communities. Never a wall. It must bring together, not separate." The announcement stunned everyone. Crawford's estate was worth millions. "But more than money," he continued, "I want to leave this testament. A dying Amish woman taught a dying English millionaire that love is the only currency that matters in the end. If that's not a miracle, I don't know what is." As the sun began to set, casting golden light through the center's windows, Samuel found himself standing before the section of the quilt that Sarah had stitched during her final days. The threads were slightly uneven, her hands had been shaking, but the image was clear. A golden ticket, transforming into a golden thread, weaving through countless lives. Anna stood beside him, baby Sarah Jr. in her arms, the other children gathered around them. "She saw it all, didn't she?" Anna marveled. "The whole pattern." "Not all," Samuel corrected. "She couldn't have seen everything, your strength in becoming mother to my children, Judge Crawford's complete transformation, the thousands of lives that would be touched. But she saw the principle that one choice, made with love, creates ripples that never end." Emma tugged at his coat. "Papa, will you tell us the story again?" "The whole story." "Which story, little one?" "The story of the golden ticket, of Mama Sarah and Mama Anna, of how we all became a family." Samuel looked around the room, at the hundreds of people whose lives had been woven together by one woman's faith and vision. At his children, who'd lost a mother but gained a community. At Anna, who'd brought new love without erasing the old. At the two Crawfords, who'd found redemption in their final acts. At the quilt that told it all in thread and fabric. "Once upon a time," he began, "there was a farmer who thought he'd lost everything. But his wife, even as she was dying, was stitching a miracle. She knew that the golden ticket wasn't about winning money. It was about discovering that we're all threads in the same quilt, all part of the same story." As he told the story, more people gathered to listen. Children who'd heard it before still leaned in, captivated. Adults who'd lived it still found new meaning in the retelling. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the memorial center, the farms, the entire valley in pristine white, like a fresh quilt, waiting for new stories to be stitched upon it. Dr. Martinez approached with a photographer. "For the book," he explained, "we need a photo of the whole family with the quilt." As they arranged themselves, Samuel and Anna, their 7 children, the Crawfords, both senior and junior, Grace Winters, Bishop Stoltzfus, and dozens of others who'd become family through this journey, Samuel felt Sarah's presence stronger than ever, not as a ghost or a memory, but as a living force in the love that connected them all. "Everyone ready?" the photographer asked. "Wait," Crawford Jr. said. "Something's missing." He went to his car and returned with that made everyone gasp. The original golden ticket, preserved in a simple frame. "I bought it from the auction company afterward," he explained. "Paid $1,000 for a piece of paper worth nothing, except it's worth everything, isn't it? It's the thread that started the whole quilt." He handed it to Samuel. "This belongs with your family." As Samuel held the golden ticket, now 5 years old but still gleaming, he thought about the journey from that desperate morning when he'd found the foreclosure notice to this moment of abundance. Not just financial, but spiritual, emotional, communal. "Sarah," he whispered, though whether to his late wife or his baby daughter, even he wasn't sure. "Look what your faith built." The photographer captured the moment, a room full of people from different worlds, united by loss, redeemed by love, held together by threads of gold. Later that evening, after the celebration had ended and the guests had departed, Samuel found himself alone in the memorial center with Sarah's journal. He'd been asked to read from it at tomorrow's Sunday service, and he was searching for the right passage. He found it on one of the last pages, written in shaky handwriting just days before she passed. "To my beloved Samuel and whoever else reads this. I'm dying, but I'm not afraid. Do you know why? Because I've learned the secret: we don't own anything in this life. Not really. Not our farms, not our money, not even our time. The only thing we can truly possess is the love we give away. And that love, once given, never dies. It plants itself in other hearts and grows into forests of connection, gardens of grace. The golden ticket isn't about winning, it's about choosing. Every day, we choose whether to grasp or give, to close or open, to fear or love. Choose love. Always love, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Because love is the thread that weaves us all together into something beautiful, something eternal. I won't see my children grow up. I won't grow old with Samuel. But I'll be in every kind word they speak, every generous act they perform, every choice they make for love over fear. That's not death, that's multiplication. So don't mourn too long for me. Instead, pick up your own thread and start stitching. Add to the quilt. Make it beautiful. Make it big enough to cover the whole world in warmth. All my love, always and forever. Sarah. Samuel closed the journal, tears streaming down his face, not tears of grief anymore, but tears of gratitude. A small hand slipped into his ma. Emma had come looking for him. "Papa, are you sad?" "No, little one, I'm grateful." "For what?" Samuel looked around the center at the quilt on the wall, the golden ticket in its frame, the photos of hundreds of families helped by the fund, the medical equipment donated by recovered patients, the books and crafts and symbols of lives touched and transformed. "For the pattern," he said, "for being able to see how all the threads connect. I don't understand. You will, someday. We're all part of a quilt, Emma. Every person we meet, every choice we make, adds another stitch. Your mama, your first mama, she understood that. She took the worst thing that could happen, dying young, and turned it into something beautiful. The golden ticket. No, sweet one. The golden ticket was just thread. What she made was love. Love that keeps growing, keeps spreading, keeps stitching people together." Emma considered this with 6-year-old seriousness. "So we're all quilters?" "Yes," Samuel said, lifting her into his arms. "We're all quilters, stitching with whatever thread life gives us." As they walked home through the snow, Emma asleep in his arms, Samuel saw lights in windows throughout the valley, Amish and English alike, all part of the same community now, all threads in the same grand design. At home, Anna was waiting on the porch, despite the cold. Baby Sarah Jr. bundled in her arms. "I was worried," she said, just reading Sarah's journal, finding the right passage for tomorrow. "Did you find it?" "I did," She wrote about multiplication, how love doesn't divide when shared, but multiplies. Anna smiled. Like our family. Exactly like our family. Inside, the house was warm and loud, with children. Mary was helping Jacob with his homework, while Thomas whittled and Ruth taught Emma a new quilting stitch. The twins were building something elaborate with blocks, their creation as unique and chaotic as the blended family they'd been born into. This was what Sarah had seen, not just survival but abundance, not just healing but transformation, not just a second chance, but a multiplication of chances, spreading outward like ripples on water. The golden ticket sat in its frame on the mantel. No longer golden really. Age had dulled its shine. But what it represented grew brighter every day. The power of choosing love over material wealth, community over independence, faith over fear. "Papa," Jacob called out, "tell us about the day you won the golden ticket." "Again," Samuel laughed. "You've heard it 100 times. It gets better each time," Ruth said. "Like Mama Anna's soup, better with age." So Samuel sat in his chair by the fire, surrounded by his children, some born to him, some given to him, all loved equally, and began the story again. It was a morning like any other, except the foreclosure notice had arrived. As he spoke, Anna worked on a new quilt, her fingers following the patterns Sarah had taught her. The design was ambitious. It would show two women, one in heaven and one on earth, both stitching the same quilt from different sides, their threads meeting in the middle to create something neither could have made alone. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the land in a blanket of possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to choose love over fear. The memorial fund would help another family. The quilting circle would welcome another patient. The community would grow wider, more inclusive, more beautiful. But tonight, in this moment, in this house full of love and laughter and the echoes of those who'd gone before, the pattern was perfect. The quilt was complete, even as it continued to grow. Sarah had been right. Death wasn't an ending, but a transformation. The golden ticket hadn't been about winning, but about choosing. And the choice, made with love, had changed everything. As the fire crackled and the children listened with rapt attention to the story they knew by heart, Samuel felt Sarah's presence one more time, not as a ghost, but as a truth. Love never dies. It just keeps stitching, thread by golden thread, until the whole world is covered in its warmth. And that, Samuel concluded, is how a golden ticket became a golden thread, weaving us all together into something beautiful. "Tell it again, Papa," Emma murmured, already half asleep. "Tomorrow, little one. The story will be there tomorrow, and the day after, and always." That's the magic of true stories. They never really end. Anna looked up from her quilting, meeting Samuel's eyes across the room. In that glance was everything: grief acknowledged, love renewed, faith sustained, hope multiplied. The golden ticket had done its work. The pattern was complete, but the quilting, the beautiful, endless, sacred work of stitching lives together, that would go on forever. And somewhere, somehow, Sarah was still stitching too, her thread golden and eternal, binding them all in love. The letter arrived on a spring morning when the dogwood trees were in full bloom. Samuel, now 52 with grey threading through his beard, opened it with hands that had grown more weathered, but no less steady. "Dear Mr. Yoder, my name is Jennifer Wu. You don't know me, but your wife Sarah saved my life. Not directly, I never met her. But 10 years ago, when I was dying of cancer in a hospital in California, someone gave me a book, Sarah's Story by Dr. Martinez. I was ready to give up, 25 years old. Terminal diagnosis, no family, no faith, no hope. Then I read about your wife's quilting circle, about planting seeds for harvests we'd never see. Something broke open in me. I decided if a dying Amish woman could create so much beauty and connection, maybe I could create something too. So I started a support group in my hospital. Then another. Then another. Mr. Yoder, There are now Sarah circles in 300 hospitals across America, thousands of patients quilting, crafting, connecting, choosing hope over despair. We've raised millions for cancer research, but more importantly, we've saved souls, people who were ready to give up, but found purpose in Sarah's story. I'm in remission now. The doctors call it miraculous. I call it Sarah's gift, the gift of believing our threads matter, that our stories continue even after the last page. I'm writing because next month, representatives from all 300 Sarah circles are gathering at the Memorial Center for the first national convention. We want to create a quilt that will travel to every hospital in America, carrying Sarah's story to places she never could have imagined. We would be honored if you and your family would be there to add the first stitch. With infinite gratitude, Jennifer Woe, President, Sarah Circles International. Samuel set down the letter, his vision blurred with tears. Anna, reading over his shoulder, was crying openly. 300 hospitals, she whispered. Sarah is in 300 hospitals. Emma, now 21 and engaged herself, took the letter to read aloud to the family. The younger children, including the newest addition, 4-year-old Jonas, named after the ex-Amish man who'd become a beloved uncle figure, listened with wonder. "Will we go, Papa?" Mary asked. She was 29 now, with 3 children of her own, but still sought her father's wisdom. Samuel looked at Sarah's original quilt on the wall, now faded but still beautiful, still telling its story in thread and time. "We'll all go," he said. Sarah's story isn't done being told, and it wasn't. It never would be. The golden thread kept weaving, through hospitals and homes, through communities and countries, through every heart that chose love over fear, connection over isolation, hope over despair. Samuel Yoder had died at 40, but her life, measured not in years but in impact, was infinite. The golden ticket had been won. The prize had been chosen. The pattern was eternal, and the quilting continued, stitch by precious stitch, covering the world in love.